start. And let me, so we'll record this session today, and then we can share with other people, or you can also watch it as well. Um, Jessica, do we have a sign-up sheet for people who are in the room today?
Yes, we do.
Okay, excellent. So, what we'll do is we'll also send out the slides to everyone who signed up for today so that you can have it for your records and review. Okay?
Okay.
So let's get started here.
Are you allowed are you able to share your screen? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm just going
Okay,
to hold on for
perfect.
1 second. Let me just make sure we're sharing here. Okay. Are you guys able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, guys. So Zia and I are immigration lawyers. We are in Toronto, but we certainly have been working with Sioux College students for many, many years. And we're really happy today to be here. Every semester, we like to, speak to students. Jessica, are students here today new students, or do we have students who have been with Sioux College for a while?
They are new. I think we might have one or two returning students.
Excellent. Okay, great. So it's a good time for you guys to understand where you need to go with your journey in Canada. Um, laws change all of the time, especially in immigration law. And what we tell you today is true today, but you'll see that there are some new policies that have already been announced that will be upcoming this year. And there will likely be a lot of other changes this new year as well. So, for everyone who's here, if you sign up, we're going to add you onto our newsletter where we're going to tell you about new changes to the law as time goes by. Okay? Okay. So, first thing we're going to do is we want to make sure that your stay in Canada as temporary residents that you maintain your status properly in Canada, okay? And then we're going to talk about permanent residence afterwards. But in order to get to permanent residence, you need to make sure that whatever you're doing as international students, you guys are temporary residents. And later on, when you get a work permit, you're still a temporary resident. So we want to make sure that you understand what you need to do in the meantime while you are studying and working. Okay? Okay. So first of all, some important rules you need to understand when you are studying is you have to actively pursue your studies in Canada, whether or not you have a study permit that is valid. So even if your study permit is still valid, but you stop studying, you will lose your student status 90 days after you stop studying, even if your study permit is still valid then. Okay. So in any situation, you can't just, quit school and stay in Canada and think that it's going to be okay. Okay. There are two exceptions to the rule that you have to be actively pursuing your studies. One is scheduled breaks. So if you are on a scheduled break, that is part of the school's academic calendar. Okay, that's fine. You're still actively pursuing studies, even if you're not attending classes, you're on a study break. That is absolutely fine. Is another exception to the rule where it's just called authorized leave. Authorized leave is when it's personal to yourself. Okay, let's say you're experiencing some difficulties where you just don't think that you can carry a full course load during a semester, or you need to take a semester off, okay? here's the thing you'll see later on when we talk about post-grad work permits. In order to get a post-grad work permit, you need to maintain full-time studies throughout the entirety of your study period, except for the last semester. So if you're saying, okay, you know what, I'm having trouble finishing this, like having a semester and carrying a full course load, you might want to take the entire semester off instead of be part-time. Because if you're a part-time student, that could disqualify you from being a post-grad work permit, qualifying for a post-grad work permit. So if you want to take a semester off, you can't just go and do it and not tell anybody. Okay. If you want to take a semester off, you can ask the school to give you authorized leave. Authorized leave. Okay. And they can give it to you for one semester. And if you get the authorized leave, then that's okay. Even if you take that semester off, you're okay. Now, beyond 150 days, you will have to file a visitor extension or some other way to extend your status because beyond 150 days, then those 90 days start counting when you have not actively pursued studies. But you can take one semester off. Okay. So make sure that you're very, very clear. Immigration these days, they monitor the student status very closely. They ask each college, including Sault College, to give them a list of students who are studying. And if they see that you're not on that list, then that could mean that they note you as not actively pursuing your studies. So you have to make sure that you are very clear as to when, if you're not going to be actively studying, that you have authorized leave. All right. Now, another thing is co-op work permits. Okay. Some of you may be in programs that have co-op programs. You have programs that require you to work as part of your studies, to get that work experience as part of your studies. That's called a co-op program. And in order to work in those programs, if it's off campus, you will need to have a co-op work permit. If you don't have a co-op work permit already and you have to do that co-op work, you better go and apply for your co-op work permit right away. Okay. Now, this co-op work permit, it comes and it says a work permit will allow you to work in programs integral to your studies. This does not just allow you to work in anything. Okay, this only allows you to work in programs that are integral to your studies. So you can't say, oh, I have a work permit, I can work anywhere. No, it's only for those co-op programs. Finally, let's talk about working elsewhere other than co-op programs. Okay, so here are some of the rules about working while you are studying. Okay, you can only work while you are a full-time student, not a part-time student, and not when you're on authorized leave. Okay. The only exception to the full-time studies is the last semester. When it's your part-time study, you can do part-time studies and you can still work. Okay. Now, the rule for when you are not on scheduled break is how many hours? 24 hours. If you're on a scheduled break, you can work full time. There's no limit to that. That's off campus. If you're working on campus, you can actually work full time on campus. Okay? Can you work full time on campus and 24 hours off campus? Yes, you can. It might be difficult for you to do your studies and do all that work, but the rules do allow you to do that. Now, once you've completed your studies, once the school sends you a note that you have completed your studies, when you've been notified, that's when you are no longer considered a student. And at that point, you have to stop working right away. You're not on a scheduled break at that point. You have to stop working. You can begin working again when you have applied for your postgrad work permit, and Zia will be telling you about that timeline afterwards, okay? But make sure when the school tells you you've completed your studies, you stop working then. The only exception to that rule is if you're going to do a second program after you've completed your first program. So let's say I complete my program in April, okay? And the school notifies me on April 27th that congratulations, you completed your program. Now, normally speaking, at that point in time, I have to stop working, okay? Unless I've registered for a new program in September and I've been accepted to the new program in September. Now, if in that situation, if I've already been accepted to the new program in September and I've completed my program on April 27th, I can actually work if it's only 150 days in between the two. Um, when you've completed your program and when you start your new program, you can actually work in that semester in between. Okay? That's only if you've been accepted to a new program.
Okay. While you're here studying, it's also important to keep an eye on when your study permit is going to be expiring. And with that, to ensure that you submit an extension application prior to that expiry date if you need one. So if your study permit is going to be expiring before you finish your program of study, you need to apply to extend your student status in Canada before your current study permit expires. This also is going to apply later when you're applying for work permits and work permit extensions. Okay. Now, as long as you submit your extension application before your current study permit expires and you submit the correct forms, the correct fees, then you'll hold what's called implied or maintained status. So this allows you to continue studying, working in Canada while your extension application is being processed by IRCC. So basically what it does is it allows you to continue, again, studying in Canada using the conditions of the study permit that you held up until a decision is made on that extension application. Okay. Now, implied status, though, does end if you leave Canada while your application is in process. So if you exit Canada, you wouldn't be able to actually return on the implied status and continue studying in Canada. Okay, so important to keep those timings in mind. Now, when you apply later for your post-grad work permit, what IRCC right now automatically provides is this work permit extension letter. Really important to understand that this letter that comes, again, it's an automatic letter that IRCC sends. It's not temporary authorization in itself. It's an automatic letter which contains a date on it that says that you're able to continue working up until this date. Right now, the period that they're providing on this letter is a year, but important to know that that date on there is arbitrary. You're able to continue working until a decision is made on that extension application, even if it's after the date that's listed on the letter. Okay. We've included a link here where you can find where IRCC has provided more information and just to confirm about this work permit extension letter and implied status and the ability to continue working. So again, Elizabeth will be sending out the slides after our presentation, so you will have this available to you. The last thing to keep in mind is restoration. So if you have your study permit, it has an expiry date on it, but by accident, let's say you missed that expiry date and you haven't submitted your extension application, you have a period of what's called 90 days to submit your restoration. Okay, so that's 90 days from the expiry of your current study permit, you can submit a restoration application, and that's to get your status back. The really important distinction between an extension and a restoration application is that, like I said, with the extension, you'll have the implied maintained status, which allows you to continue studying in Canada. However, if you do not submit the extension application and instead have to submit a restoration application, that restoration does not allow you to continue working or continue studying until you get your new study permit approved. So very important distinction between the two of them. Now, like I said, there is a 90-day period to submit the restoration application. That 90 days depends on, again, if you haven't submitted your extension application, then it's from the date of it's from the expiry date on your current study permit. If you submit your extension application and it gets refused, you have 90 days from the refusal to submit your restoration application. Okay.
We do a lot of social media, and on our YouTube, which we will post this webinar as well, the recording of the webinar. We actually, Ziad and I have done a video telling employers about international students when you graduate, when you can work, and also about, the WPEXT letter, etc. So do check it out. It's YouTube. I think it's at LM Law Group or something like that. Oh, I'll have to post the handles afterwards. Okay, so applying for your study permit extensions. Okay, some of you may have your study permits expire before you're able to apply for your postgrad work permit. Sometimes your passport expires. Sometimes the officer, they're supposed to give you a study permit that lasts for 90 days after your program finishes, but sometimes they don't. You may not have enough time to apply for your postgrad work permit if it's issued just, at the end of April, for example, you'll only get your notice at the end of April. And sometimes you want to do a new program, right? So if you're going to apply for study permit extensions, what are some of the things that you need to know? If you're going to change your school, you need to apply for a new study permit. And except for very exceptional circumstances where like the DLI has lost designation, suspended, program closure, etc., you cannot start studying until you have received the new study permit. Okay? If you are studying at the same DLI, then you don't need it. So if you're going to do a second program at Sault College, you don't need to have a new study permit. You can study based on the current study permit. If you need to extend it, file the extension before the current study permit expires, and you'll be able to study based on implied status. PALS. If you're going to be the PALS, they're required if you're going to be going to a new program in a different DLI, or if it's a different level of study at the same DLI. So if you're doing, for example, a master's program, and you're currently doing a college program, then you'll need that. Otherwise, you're fine. If it's the same undergraduate or diploma programs, okay? And now the field of study, for those of you who are new, you're going to need to meet the field of study. For those of you who are older, who have applied for your study permit before November 1st, 2024, if you applied before, it doesn't need to meet the field of study, but after November 21st, 2024, all programs that are non-degree will need to meet the field of study. Okay.
Okay, let's talk about the postgrad work permit. Now, this is one of the most important steps because it's key to getting the work experience that you need in Canada in order to be able to qualify and apply for your permanent residence. Now, you can only get the postgrad work permit's like a unicorn. You can only get it once in your lifetime. You can only qualify for it and get it once in your lifetime. So what that means is that the length of the postgrad work permit is very important. For example, if you only get a 1-year postgrad work permit, that may not give you enough time in Canada to get the work experience you need for your permanent residence application. Okay, so really important to keep in mind that the postgrad work permit you can only get once, and you want to be aware of how long of a postgrad work permit you're eligible for. So in terms of the length, for any non-master's programs, the length that you're eligible for will coincide with the length of the program of study. So if you do a program that's anywhere between 8 months to 2 years, you'll get a postgrad work permit that's valid for that same period of time. So for example, you do a 1 year program, you'd be eligible for a 1 year postgrad work permit. If your program is 2 years or longer, then you're eligible for the maximum duration of the postgrad, which is 3 years. Okay. Now, what you can also do is combine two programs together to be eligible for a 3 year work permit. So that maximum duration again. Now, again, going back to the field of study requirements, like Elizabeth said, if you're applying for the study permit, if you've applied for the study permit after November 1st, 2024, then the field of study requirement does apply for non-degree programs. So if your first program, if the first program you completed, the field of study requirement didn't apply because of the dates, then your second one, if that is after November 1st, 2024 date, you may now be required to meet that field of study requirement for your second program. So keep that in mind if you're trying to combine two programs together, that the second program may need to meet that field of study requirement. In terms of distance education, so this is anything where you're doing programs with a component online. It can only be less than 50% of your program in order for you to be eligible for that postgrad work permit. One of the most important requirements that I see come up quite a bit with international students is, and Elizabeth has talked about this earlier, is maintaining that full-time student status. So in each semester of your program, and that's every single semester of your program or programs here in Canada, you do need to be a full-time student. And IRCC is becoming or has become very particular about this. This is something that they will look at the transcripts to ensure that you are a full-time student in every semester of your program in order to be eligible for that postgrad work permit. The only exceptions to this is, again, if you're on an authorized leave, which Elizabeth has talked about earlier, or if you're in your final semester of your program and you are only required to take a part-time course load in order to finish your program. Those are the only exceptions to that full-time student requirement. And again, this is something that IRCC is very particular about. As of March last year, there's also now a requirement for language exam results. So when you're submitting your postgrad work permit application, you do need to include your language test results. The level that you need to be able to show does depend on the programs or program that you've completed here in Canada. For non-degree programs, that's CLB 5. For any degree programs, that's CLB 7. Now, in terms of being able to work, Elizabeth did talk about this a little bit earlier as well. While you are a full-time student, your study permit does allow you to work in Canada using your study permit. However, that ability to work on your study permit does end as soon as you have received any confirmation from the school that you have completed your program of study. Because essentially that means you're now no longer a full-time student, and so you can't use your study permit to work anymore. Now, once you have applied for your postgrad work permit, as soon as you've submitted that postgrad work permit application, you can start working full time as long as your study permit is still valid, so it's not expired on the day of your postgrad work permit application, and you're within 90 days of the completion of your program. Okay. Really important to keep this timeline in mind. So let's go over it again. When we're
So,
looking, oh,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
So Zia, I just wanted to note,
Yeah.
IRCC website said you can apply for the post-grad work permit within 180 days. Why is it that we say that it's 90 days?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason we say 90 days goes back to the requirement that you talked about earlier when we're talking about actively pursuing studies. When you're on your study permit, you do always have to be actively pursuing studies, and that ends 90 days following the completion of your program. So essentially, your study permits become invalid 90 days from the completion of your program. So, yes, IRCC's website says that you can apply within 180 days. But if you're in Canada and you're here physically and you're applying for your postgrad work permit, your study permit becomes invalid 90 days following the completion of your program. So that's why we advise to look at the 90 days rather than the 180 days that IRCC puts.
And right now, the work permits in Canada are taking 7 months, 8 months sometimes and you probably will want to work while you're waiting for your work permit. So if you apply within the 90 days and when your study permit is still valid, you can work while waiting for your work permit.
Yeah. It's really important again because you're trying to get all that work experience to qualify and apply for your permanent residence. So really important to get these timelines correct. So let's go through it again here. When we're looking at the end of your program, so if you're still writing your final exams, doing your final papers, basically you still are in that program, still very busy. You're still considered to be enrolled as a full-time student, so you can work using your study permit. Okay. When you've finished your final exams, you've submitted your final papers, all you're doing is waiting for your results to know that, you've passed the program. At that point, again, because you haven't received any notification from the school that you've completed your program requirements, you've passed your last courses, you're still considered to be a full-time student. So at that period of time, you can still work. As soon as you receive any notification from the school that you have met the requirements of your program, this could be an email, could be final transcripts, could be anything and final grades, anything that tells you that you have completed your program of study. At that point, you are no longer considered to be a student, and so you do need to stop working immediately. And as I mentioned earlier, as soon as you then submit your postgrad work permit application, assuming that you have that valid study permit and it's within 90 days of the program completion, you can start working full time as you wait for the postgrad work permit to be approved and issued.
Okay, so let's start talking about spousal work permits. I don't know if any of you have a spouse, but first I wanted to just sort of talk about what the definition of spouse is in Canada. So a spouse doesn't just mean that you're married to them. Common law partners are also included for spousal work permits. And sometimes there's a lot of confusion about who is a common law partner. In immigration, a common law partner is someone who you have resided together in a conjugal-like relationship, so it's not just roommates, okay, for at least 1 year. All right. That 1 year mark is very important. And it's important that you declare your common law status in any kind of applications where they ask you, what is your marital status? And you'll see that in every single application that you are applying for with immigration. What is your marital status? And if you have a common law partner who you've resided with at least 1 year, it doesn't matter whether or not you love them. I don't care about that. Immigration doesn't care about that. They don't care about it, how much you think that you're, serious or not. If you've resided with them for 1 year in a conjugal-like relationship, they are your common law spouse. Okay? So you must declare that. Otherwise, it's misrepresentation. And misrepresentation carries with it very, very serious consequences. A bar from Canada for at least 5 years, etc., etc. Okay? So now, whether you have a married spouse or common law partner, they can be eligible for spousal work permits, open spousal work permits, but the rules have changed in the last couple of years. Okay, so for students, right now, only master's students can have their spouses can have spousal work permits. However, if you are a current student and your spouse has obtained the work permit before the rules changed, they can extend it to the length of time of the existing study permit. Workers, once you get your post-grad work permit, if you have a spouse, then if it depends on your job offer, okay? If it's tier 0 or 1, we're going to talk about tiers in a bit, okay? But for occupation codes, there are basically 6 different occupation codes. 0, 1, 2, and 3 are all high-skilled occupations. And 0, tier 0 and 1, if you have a job offer in those tiers, your spouse can have a work permit, but only if your work permit is valid for at least 16 months. Okay. There are exceptions for those people who have applied for permanent residence as well. It doesn't really matter then what the tier is, you can do it, but otherwise, the tiers and the length of the work permit matter. And if it's your job offer is tier 2 or 3, then it has to appear on a list. Okay. So let's move on to permanent residence. And you probably would have heard a lot of things right now on the news about how difficult it is for international students these days, for anyone really in Canada to get permanent residence. That's because in the past few years, there were a lot of unprecedented number of international students and other workers who were able to come to Canada. And the government also shrunk the number of permanent residence spots as well. But recently the number of temporary residents have come down a lot. In fact, the number of international students has been reduced dramatically last year as well. So your competition is probably not as bad as those who came 1 or 2 years ago. That being said, it's very, very important to plan because still for the next few years, getting permanent residence, there is still going to be a high competition for that. Okay. So first thing about permanent residence you have to understand is what national occupation codes are. Okay. There are 6 tiers. Like I said, tier 0 to tier 3 is considered high skilled. Tier 4 to tier 5 is considered low skilled. Okay. And so, what is your tier? We need to see what exactly your duties are. Okay. It's not necessarily about what you're called. I can call myself a president, but if all I'm doing is I'm sweeping the floors, I'm not a president, I'm a janitor, right? So it really depends on what you do. And the officers, when they look at determining the knock code for you, they look at your duties. The other thing that they also look at is mandatory employment requirements that are on the website. So if you search NOC codes, NOC codes, you will come up to the government website where it lists all of the occupations. And you can search in there. And when on the descriptions, there will be employment requirements. And sometimes it's very important to look at what is required. Okay. There's a difference between an employment requirement that is usually required or sometimes required compared to is required. If it is required, it means it's mandatory. And if you don't have that mandatory employment requirement, it could mean that you can't be classified as that occupation. For example, I'm a lawyer, and if you look at the occupations for lawyers, it will say that you must have a law degree. So even if someone doesn't have a law degree and they say, well, I'm doing the same thing that you're doing, they cannot be classified as being a lawyer. Okay. So those are some of the important things that you need to see. And I put the website here as well that you can go and check out the knock codes.
Okay, let's talk about the express entry system. Now, this is probably one of the most well-known systems and one of the most talked about. So let's go through how it works. With the express entry system, the way that it works is that the first step is creating an online profile. Now, in order to do this, you need to be eligible in one of the three programs. So before we go any further, one thing to keep in mind is that with express entry, the express entry system is a system in itself. You still have to be eligible in one of IRCC's PR programs, and the three that qualify for the express entry system are the Federal Skilled Worker, Canadian Experience Class, and Federal Skilled Trades. So once you're eligible in one of these three programs, you do the first step, you create your online profile, which then puts you into the express entry pool. Now, what's important to understand here is that going into the express entry pool is basically just saying, hi, Canada, I'm interested in becoming a permanent resident. It's not an application in itself. When you create a profile and are in the express entry pool, you are a candidate. You've expressed that you're interested in becoming a permanent resident. What happens is when you're in the pool, IRCC uses what's called the comprehensive ranking system, and we'll talk about how the point system works in a moment, but they use the CRS system to give you a score. And that score is used to rank you against everyone else in the pool. And what IRCC does is every so often they'll go into the pool and they'll do a draw. There's different types of draws, and we'll go into that in a moment as well. But when they do a draw, they send out what are called invitations to apply. So it's only after you receive an invitation to apply that you can then prepare and submit your actual PR application. So going through this process, when you create a profile, when you go into the pool, you're saying you're interested in becoming a permanent resident, but you haven't yet applied. It's only after you receive an invitation that you can then prepare and submit your PR application. Let's take a look at the different programs that qualify for the express entry system. So the first one is the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Now, with the Federal Skilled Worker Program, this isn't a program that IRCC has been focusing on as much in the past couple years. With that being said, it is still important to look at this program because you may be eligible to go into the pool based on meeting the requirements for the Skilled Worker Program and then be eligible to be selected using one of the category-based draws. With the Federal Skilled Worker Program, there are different requirements, one of which is the work experience requirement. For the Skilled Worker Program, you need to have at least 1 year of high skilled work experience that is in a single occupation within the past 10 years. Okay, now for the Skilled Worker Program, that work experience can be obtained anywhere in the world, so it doesn't have to be just in Canada. It can be self-employed work experience, and it can be work experience that you've obtained while you are a student. But it does have to be continuous and in a single occupation. So you can't combine multiple high-skilled knock codes together to make you eligible for the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Has to be continuous, which means that there's no breaks in your employment, and it has to be within a single occupation. Okay. There's other requirements for the skilled worker program, including language. There's an education component. There is a minimum savings requirement, and then there's a score where you have to meet a minimum score of 67 for the skilled worker program. Comparatively, if we talk about the Canadian Experience Class program, there's quite a fewer requirements for it. But most importantly here, the work experience requirement. For the Canadian Experience class, you need to have at least 1 year of high-skilled work experience that's obtained in the past 3 years in Canada. Okay. Now, with CEC, though, self-employed work experience or work experience you obtained while you were a student will not count towards that 1 year for CEC. So, really important distinction between the two programs. However, with CEC, it doesn't have to be in a single occupation, so you can combine multiple high-skilled roles together to meet your 1 year of work experience. Okay. It also does not need to be continuous. So again, if there's breaks in your employment, and if you do one job for 6 months and there's a break before you start your second position, you'll still be able to combine those two together as long as it's within the past 3 years.
So, just wanted to go back to this. In the past, I don't know how long, since almost COVID, um, when we're looking at express entry, they have general draws, and then Zia's going to talk about the category-based draws. When they do general draws, so they invite like most people who can qualify above a certain score, they're looking at the Canadian experience class. That's why the Canadian experience class for general draws is very important. The federal skilled worker, though, you may still, depending on your circumstance, you may still want to put yours in for the category-based draws.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important to keep in mind. Now, regardless, when you're looking at the draws and you're looking at when IRCC does a draw, you'll see that they put a minimum points requirement. And so this is based on the comprehensive ranking system. So let's go through where or how you get points in the CRS system. So the first is age. Um, Unfortunately, as you get older, as you pass 30, in your 30s, it goes down. I think it's 5 to 6 points every single year. And so at that point, it's no longer a happy birthday anymore. And then when you get up to your 40s, it goes down 10 to 11 points, I believe, every year. So nothing that you can do there, but is something to keep in mind that with the CRS system, you do want to be putting your profile in as soon as possible because age is one component that IRCC does use for the CRS system. So yeah, do it early. The next thing is education. Now, if you have a 3 year education program, and then you have, for example, a bachelor's degree, and on top of it, you have another program that you've done back home, you can combine those together to get points for multiple programs in education. So with education, what IRCC is looking at is the what post-secondary education you have completed. It doesn't necessarily have to be just in Canada. It can be here, it can be outside of Canada. For any education, though, outside of Canada, you do need to have an education assessment completed. But essentially, we're looking at what the highest level or highest levels of education are if you're combining two together. With language, IRCC does give, so in the CRS system, you have points for your primary language, and if you have a secondary language, you can get points for both official languages. So being English and French, you do need to have an acceptable language test in order to be able to claim points for language. With the language points, IRCC looks at each category. So there's the speaking, listening, reading, and writing. In each of those, you're getting points based on your score on those language tests. With Canadian work experience, we're looking at here, this is any high-skilled work experience. When we're talking about the CRS points, we're looking back at the high-skilled work experience that you've completed in Canada within the past 10 years. Again, it has to be work experience where you're an employee, so not self-employed, and work experience that you've obtained while you're not a student. RCC also looks at work experience outside of Canada within the past 10 years. So there is category of points for foreign work experience. This has become exceptionally important over the last couple of years, especially because when we look at the minimum scores that are being drawn, one of the distinguishing factors is having both work experience in Canada and outside of Canada. So when we're talking about foreign work experience, IRCC is again looking at any high-skilled work experience that you've completed in the last 10 years. Now, when we talk about foreign work experience, there's different ways to qualify for this category of points. Really, they're looking at where the employer is located. So if you're physically outside of Canada, you're working for an employer outside of Canada, then very clearly that is foreign work experience. However, if you are physically in Canada and working for an employer and being paid outside of Canada, that may also qualify you for those foreign work experience points. So something to keep in mind there.
And Zia, also we've been seeing sometimes when people apply for things like your study permit or work permit, sometimes people don't declare everything that you're supposed to declare, all of your work experience in the past 10 years. And then later, for your express entry, you suddenly remember, oh yeah, I actually have had foreign work experience that qualify. There has been a lot of issues in these situations because whatever you say, similar to declaration of your marital status, whatever you say on the forms, you declare that it's completely accurate and true. And so if you did not declare your work experience outside of Canada when you applied for your study permit or your work permit, this could become a huge issue if later on you want to declare that you have foreign work experience. And we have seen a lot of issues where now the officers look at the applications and they say, well, were you lying then or are you lying now? Okay. So it's very important that when you are making all your applications, that you're declaring all of your circumstances as asked on the forms. And if that situation holds true that you did not declare your work experience when you were applying for a study permit, and it can become important later on for express entry, you must come and see us or another qualified lawyer before you start declaring it. If well, you have to declare, but if you're going to use those points as well, that becomes even more of an issue.
Yeah. If you have a spouse, that spouse's education, their language proficiency in every area on the language test, and if they have any high-skilled work experience in Canada, that can also count towards points on your profile. Provincial nominee programs. Now, really important here that we're speaking, and Elizabeth's going to go through the provincial nominee programs. But really important here that we're talking specifically about the PNP programs that are express entry linked. So every province creates their own PNP programs. Some of them are linked to express entry, others are not. Here, specifically, when we're talking about the CRS system, you can get 600 points if you have a nomination from a province through a program that is express entry based. So not every provincial nominee program, but the ones that are based on express entry. If you have studied in Canada, depending on the program and length of study, you can get either 15 or 30 points just based on having completed that program in Canada. If you have a sibling that is either a Canadian or a permanent resident, they do physically have to be living in Canada at the time of your application, but that can give you additional points as well. Fluency in French, this is huge. French has become one of the main targets for IRCC, so having French fluency does make a huge difference. Again, we're talking about needing to have your language test completed. If you do have, depending on what your scores are on that French language test, you do get additional points for French and English if you have both of those completed and are meeting minimum levels on both tests. And then trade certification. So basically, if you've gone through and you have a like a Red Seal trade, for example, then you can get additional points for that certification as well. Okay, so when we looked at the express entry system, we said that you go into the pool and then the most important thing is getting your invitation. Well, there's different ways to get that invitation to apply, like Elizabeth had mentioned earlier. IRCC does general draws. They also do what are called category-based draws. So IRCC has created specific categories, and what they do is they use these categories to target specific either their occupations or in this case, French. So the current categories that IRCC has outlined, the first one is French language proficiency. So this is for someone who has at least CLB 7s on all areas of the French language test. Basically, it can make you eligible for the French language draws. Biggest benefit here with the French language draws is that the minimum scores that are required on in terms of CRS points are much lower than on any of the other areas or on sorry, in any of the other draws. So it does make a huge difference if you're eligible through the French language category. In terms of the occupation-based draws, IRCC has their current categories include healthcare occupations, STEM occupations, trade-based occupations, agricultural, agri-food occupations, education occupations. And we've listed on here some of the specific occupation codes that are included in each of these different categories. And so basically each of these categories has outlined a list of NOC codes that are eligible to be part of these category-based draws. And again, the big benefit is that when we're comparing the minimum scores required under, for example, CEC versus these category-based draws, you're going to see that the minimum scores needed for category-based draws are generally lower than what you see that are being pulled under the CEC. So if you are eligible, if you do have these work experience, or if you are thinking forward-looking, you may want to get work experience in an occupation that is targeted through these category-based draws. The other thing that IRCC announced at the end of last year is that there's going to be a new category for physicians with Canadian work experience. So we're still waiting to see when IRCC starts these, but basically it's going to be for physicians who have completed work experience in Canada.
And IRCC, they change these category-based draws as well. You'll see like where we say added, etc. That was changed last year. And then Zia mentioned the new physicians with Canadian work experience draws that the minister had announced just a few weeks before Christmas. There may very well be more changes upcoming this year. That remains to be seen. So yeah, so stay tuned and we'll let you guys know through our newsletters once these changes are out.
And one thing to add about these occupation categories is that the work experience that you need under each of these categories is you need to have at least 6 months of full-time continuous work experience in a single occupation that's listed there. So really important to think about this strategically because you may be able to be eligible, like we said earlier, under the Federal Skilled Worker Program. You may have completed 6 months then of work experience in Canada in one of the category-based occupations. So, moving things like combining different I guess avenues together and being able to get your ITA is really important to think about.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You don't need to wait until you think you qualify
Mhm.
for a consultation with us. We recommend that you come as early as possible. I like to see people even before you even apply for your study permits, right? Because immigration is all about planning. And sometimes, for example, it's 6 months of if full-time, which is equal to 30 hours a week. 6 months of full-time work experience is in the last 3 years, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So let's say you were able to, get some work experience while you're studying. even though you're working 24 hours a week, you can get some work experience, uh, and you can add those hours together to equal to the 6 months over, a 1 year period of time, for example. So those are some important things that we calculate when we're looking at what you can do to potentially increase your opportunities for permanent residence. All right, now we talked about express entry, but express entry is not the end all and be all for permanent residence. There are a host of other programs. And I have to say something to you guys. You guys made a very smart choice to go to Sault College. Not only are the people there fantastic, not only are the programs good, but it is very, very good choice for immigration. Okay. And that is because not only are you eligible for express entry, for those people who are going to go to Quebec, you're not eligible for express entry. So number one, you're not going to go to Quebec. Okay, so that's express entry is there. Now, if you are going to stay in Ontario, and especially if you are going to stay working in Ontario for a while in Sault Ste. Marie, there are a bunch of other programs that are going to be eligible to you that are going to be different from people who aren't going to be staying in Sault Ste. Marie. That is because Sault Ste. Marie is one of the targeted regions that the government of Ontario and the federal government has identified where they would like people to go and live and work. Okay. So the first program I'm going to be telling you about is the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. What are provincial nominee programs? They're programs where each province has made an agreement with the federal government to allow the province to select people that they want to stay and get permanent residence. Now, the thing about provincial nominee programs is the province is interested in selecting people based on certain criteria. One of the main criteria is that you're going to want to stay in Ontario. Now, sometimes people ask me, well, if I apply under provincial nominee program, does that mean I have to stay in Ontario for the rest of my life? No, it does not. Once you have permanent residence, you do have the right to change your intent, change your mind, and go to another province. But until you have permanent residence, you should maintain the conditions that allowed you to get nominated, one of them being that you are intending to stay in Ontario. Okay. And the other things that are required. Now, the Ontario Provincial Nominee Programs, there has been a lot of changes in the last year because the federal government cut the numbers that Ontario can nominate by 50% without their knowledge in the beginning of the year. And so Ontario is scrambling, trying to figure out how to nominate people. And they didn't nominate too many people, but guess who they nominated? They nominated people who were in targeted areas like Northern Ontario, like Sault Ste. Marie. Okay. They also targeted people in different occupations, but there were a lot of people selected from places like Sault Ste. Marie. Now, the Ontario government has made some announcements of upcoming changes to the programs in this new year. It's not set in stone yet, but when they've announced that this is what they're looking at, and Zia and I will be meeting with some officials to get some more understanding about what's going to happen. But when they've made these announcements, it means it's probably going to come true. And so we're going to be telling you some of the things that they've announced that they want to change. Not set in stone yet. Once the new policies are out, then we could have another webinar. And if you're on their newsletter list, you can join, and we'll be sending out news on that. Okay, so here are some of the things. So first of all, they're going to likely cut a lot of the current programs. So there are current programs such as the express entry based streams where you're in the pool for express entry and they select you and you are invited. Those are probably going to be cut. And there are also master's and PhD streams where if people attended a master's or PhD program in Ontario, they can apply without a job offer. Those are going to likely be cut. There are going to be changes. They're going to keep employer-based streams, though. Those are streams where you have a job offer from an employer in Ontario. They're going to keep those streams, but they're going to be making some changes. First of all, they're going to be combining. There used to be two programs, one called the International Student Stream for those people who graduated from an eligible program in Canada, where it was and you graduate within 2 years. And there was another stream for those people who had 2 years of work experience in the occupation out of the last 5 years. They're collapsing those two. Before they're all in two different pools. Now everybody's going to be in one pool for this. Okay. And so basically the salary needs to meet median wage unless you graduated from a school in Ontario now. Likely there's going to be some eligible programs that you need to be eligible for. But if you graduate within the last 2 years, you can meet entry level wage. And then you can qualify either if you have 6 months of work experience with your employer, or you have 2 years of work experience in that same occupation in the last 5 years anywhere in the world. And the education, either you have post-secondary credential, or if you've worked in Ontario for 6 months with your employer, then in the same knock code, then you don't need the education. Now, beyond that, there is also going to be a points system likely. And they'll be selecting you based on the points system, but also they may very well do what they've been doing with the employer-based stream, where you're located, where your job offer is. And so if I was a betting person, I would bet, or if I, wanted to get permanent residence and have a higher chance of getting permanent residence, I would try to find some jobs in your area in Sault Ste. Marie. They're also going to have a low skill stream as well. So remember I said high skill streams are tier what? 0, 1, 2, and 3. Low skill streams are tier 4 and 5. Okay. So the low skill streams, it's 9 months of work experience in the same occupation code with the same employer. They used to have a list. This seems to say that they may not have one list. They may be able to be open to many people, any sort of occupation, but they're going to be selecting based on occupations. And there's a lot of other questions, whether or not there are employer requirements. It may be the same as the previous employer requirements. That remains to be seen. There may be different points criteria. Likely the draws, like I said, will be based on regions and occupations. Jessica, are we running out of time?
Kind of, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you were just about done anyways, or
Yes, I think we have around 15 more minutes. Is that
yeah, so if we wanted to allow some time for Q&A, we can speed
okay?
along
Let
maybe the
me try to
slides.
really speed it up. We'll go really fast here. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
So, there may be new programs as well that the government has announced. So there's a priority health care stream. If you're in one of those occupations, even without a job offer, you may be selected. There's going to be an entrepreneur stream, which is very interesting. And it's for people who have already established or operating a business in Ontario, or they're going to have purchased and operating an existing business in Ontario. And there's an exceptional talent stream for people who are of extraordinary talent as well.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the RCIP, the Rural Community Immigration Pilot Program. And the reason is that Sault Ste. Marie is actually selected as one of the 14 communities across Canada to participate in the RCIP program. So it's a great program to go through for permanent residents. In terms of requirements for the program, one of them is a work experience requirement. So you do need to have at least 1 year of work experience within the past 3 years. Now, with the RCIP program, you do need to have a job offer. And so your work experience, the knock of your work experience has to be related to the knock of your job offer. Now, when I say related, basically the way that IRCC has done is looked at the level of your job offer, your tier level, and said, okay, this is what the tier level of your work experience needs to be. Very importantly for international graduates, so for those of you who have completed at least a program that's 2 years in length, and you've been physically present in Sault Ste. Marie for at least 16 months in the past 2 years prior to your graduation, you can be exempt from that requirement for work experience entirely. So something to look at potentially when you've just even finished your program of study. There's a language requirement for the RCIP program. Education is at a high school level in terms of minimum. There is a minimum savings requirement, but if you're already working in Canada, so on a postgrad work permit or waiting for the postgrad work permit and you're working in Canada, then you don't need to meet that funds requirement. Now, with the RCIP program, very importantly, every community that's part of the RCIP program has created their own process to go through and select candidates. So essentially, the first thing you're doing when you're eligible through RCIP is you're looking at, in this case, Sault Ste. Marie's specific community requirements, and you're applying to Sault Ste. Marie first. So like I mentioned, you do need to have a qualified job offer within Sault Ste. Marie. Employer does need to go through the process of being designated first, so they need to apply and be approved by Sault Ste. Marie, and then you'll be able to apply for the program. And really importantly, there are priority occupations. So every community has outlined, I think it's a list of 25, if I'm not mistaken, 25 occupations that are part of the RCIP program. That list will change every year, and Sault Ste. Marie specifically says that they're looking at it this month to update for the coming year. So really important. It's a great program. It does include low-skilled occupations, so something to think about looking at as well.
Okay, so now you may look at all this and you probably have a headache and you may be overwhelmed. That's normal, okay? It's not an easy system to go through, our immigration system, but there are ways if you plan properly. And so, normally what we do when you come to us is we look at ways, maybe express entry, it's one of the fastest ways to get permanent residence. Maybe there are ways that you can get through, how to increase your points. If express entry doesn't work, we'll look at alternatives for you. And very importantly, until you get permanent residence, you need to find a way to maintain your status. So before you just go and apply for that postgrad work permit, you might want to come, especially if that postgrad work permit is only eligible for 1 year. You might want to come and have a consultation with us to see how you might be able to extend your status or get permanent residence if your work permit is expired. Because you don't just qualify for a work permit once your postgrad work permit expires. You have to have a reason that is on the criteria for immigration to extend your work permit. And a lot of people these days don't, and then they have to leave if they don't qualify for permanent residence. So you want to make sure you know your path or potential paths before as soon as possible. Okay, so plan and plan some more. I have our information here if you want to come for a consultation. If you want to come for a consultation, do tell us you're coming from Sault College because we always give Sault College students a discount. Our consultation fee is $100 plus tax. So do let us know that you've come from Sault College. And that's our social media handles as well. Jessica, let's go through some questions.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you to our students. They've had a lot of information today. They're being very patient and they're probably getting hungry. Let me see if I can do this. I don't know if
Okay.
that'll work very well or not.
All right.
Okay. Does anybody have a question today that is kind of pressing or urgent to you? We could always email like a collaboration of questions as well. If you don't think of something right now, you can get your question to me and then I can email it off. But go ahead and raise your hand if you do have a question right now. Sure.
Just to clarify, Elizabeth said that we have the authorization through co-op in some courses.
Yep.
And we have also the authorization to work 24 hours
Yes.
During the week. But this 24 hours is inside the co-op. You have to work in the related field that we are doing the course.
No, did you hear that, Elizabeth?
That's right. So the
Yeah.
co-op work is separate from the 24 hours. So the 24 hours is outside of the co-op, but you need a co-op work permit to allow you to work in the co-op work.
Oh,
And your 24 hours can be any part-time job. Doesn't have to be related to your field.
thank you.
You're
That's right.
welcome.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Yep, in the back there. Correct. You should have received it through the port of entry along with your study permit.
I didn't hear that question, but I
She just
assume you
asked
know
if
the
it's
answer,
the if it's
Jessica.
the
Okay.
co-op
Yeah.
that you get at immigration.
Yes. So
If it was that permit.
sometimes the officers forget to issue the co-op work permit. So if you did not get your co-op work permit and you need a co-op work permit, go and apply for it right away. You can apply for that online.
Yeah, sure.
When you have less than 90 days after your post completion, so how do you apply for the postgrad accreditation after that?
If he's gone past his 90 days after graduation.
I have less than 90 days. I mean, like after completing the post.
Oh, if your study permit expires
That, yeah.
So then
in less than 90.
yeah. So if your study permit expires less than 90 days, then the due date is your study permit. So whichever comes first, your study permit expiry or the 90 days. And if your study permit expires before, let's say you even get notice that you're even finish your program, you should go and extend your study permit right away because you must have a valid study permit in hand, not on implied status, in hand in order to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit to be issued.
And when can we extend the study permit? What's the time now?
When can he extend his study permit? What's the timeline?
You can extend your study permit before your current study permit expires. Yeah. You know, as soon as you qualify. It used to be that, you know, we recommend like 5 months, 4 months before, but these days study permits take 7 months to be issued. So I would apply earlier.
I'll just go here. Yep.
Okay, I just for clarification, my son is going college this September,
Mhm.
and he is with me now. So is he allowed to work?
Right. Her son is starting college in September, and he's here with her right now. Is he here on a study permit or he's just here with you? He's here on a study permit, and is he studying high school?
College.
No, sorry, but is he studying right now? No. Okay, so he's not studying until September. She wants to know if he can work.
No.
No.
You have to be a full-time student that is on the post-secondary program in order to work.
Okay. Okay, and in the back there, you had another question? Sorry, if I heard that right, you just want to confirm that you apply for the PGWP after confirmation of completion?
Yeah, do you want to go?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you need to have completed your program of study first before you can submit your postgrad work permit application. And part of that application includes your transcripts and your letter from your school.
Any other questions? Okay. And like I said, if questions come to you, you can always check with myself and Marie Claire as well. And if it's something that we can't answer, we would definitely reach out to Elizabeth on your behalf. Oh, one more. Sorry, at what point during the post-grad work period can you join the Express Entry program
As soon as
to
Oh, go
create a
ahead.
profile?
You may be able to create a profile today.
Mm.
We don't know what your circumstances are, but there are many people who apply for who get permanent residence through express entry without ever having stepped foot in Canada. So it really depends on your own circumstances. Come and talk to us, and we'll do a plan for you.
Yeah, it's not about what period, like how long you've had your post-grad work permit. It's not length of time in Canada. It's really looking to see when are you eligible based on past work experience, which could be inside or outside of Canada. Um,
Okay.
Okay, I think we will wrap it up because they have a lunch to get to in O'Deno's, and I'm sure, like I said, they're probably starving and they've been sitting here all morning with obtaining all this information. But thank you so much to both of you for your time and for sharing all of this wonderful information with us. And yeah, hopefully we can we'll have another session in the near future. And yeah, thanks as always. Yay!
Hey, hello, hello. Hi, guys. All right. Well, Happy New Year. Have a great lunch, guys. And here's to a fantastic new year for you guys. Take care.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.